for the Sewing Connection, Series 14, Program 8. Early in the spring, we about froze our toes as we boarded a Seattle catamaran to take us across the water up to Victoria, British Columbia. What a charming place that is, and what a warm surprise greeted us. Everything was in bloom and just beautiful, but still with a little nip in the air. In a pricey shop, I found just the thing for that. A sweater jacket all mixed in with suede, and thought, what a great recycle job that would make. Well, down on the table, I have a turtleneck sweater, and that's how this began, except the one I'm wearing was newer and heavier, and this one is so ancient, and confidentially, I grabbed it out of my husband's side of the closet, and if I cut it up, he'll never even know about it. He'll never remember it, it's so old, so I'm going to cut it up. Well, where I started with this is, first of all, I want to make this into a jacket, and because it's going to be a jacket instead of a sweater, you want it to be a little roomy maybe. I'm going to have a lining inside, and I'm going to wear it over a blouse or a t-shirt or a sweater, so I want it roomier. It's a jacket after all, so I knew I wanted to add more to it, and what the more is going to be is suede. But what you have to decide is how much of that suede, or how much whatever fabric you're using. And so this is the problem. What I needed to do, instead of just putting that sweater on and seeing, you can't guess how much bigger it needs to be. You have to have an opening somewhere so that it splits apart and shows you how much space there is, and therefore how much you're going to need. Well, what I did with this one is open the sides, and however much they were open, that's what I put here, because I reasoned, well, it's going to be open down the front eventually, but it's the sides where I'm going to add the extra. So this is why I opened the sides first to try it on. Now you could just as easily open the front, and however much it splits when it fits the way you want it to do, then you just take half that amount and put it on each side, and it would be the same thing. So 6 of one, half dozen of another. What I've already done with this is mark the very center front by simply folding it in half right here up at the shoulder seams and putting a pin right there in the middle of it. And that's all the markings you need, because once you have that middle marked, you're going to cut the whole thing on one rib all the way down, so that's all the marking you need. I brought it up here to the top too, so I'll just start it here and take out my pin and then cut the whole thing open. Now if you're wondering, can you really cut a sweater open without it completely falling apart, without it unraveling or unknitting itself? And yes, you can, if it is a commercial sweater, if it's one that was machine knit. If it's a hand knit sweater, probably not. And what you'd want to do to recycle a hand knit sweater like this is to first of all stay stitch a couple of rows, and those also, if it's a rib knit, then those also just go down some ribs and do a straight line. And even if that line goes a little bit crooked when it gets to the bottom, as it sometimes does in sweaters, it still would look better probably to go with the rib instead of kind of cutting over and crossing a few. So I'm just going to go straight down that rib. Now if I would just stop right at this place, I could insert a zipper in here and have some sort of a nice zipper neckline, but I'm going to keep on going and make a cardigan with this. Now where you might have a little bit of problem, and you don't know, it's a case-by-case event, you don't know actually until you cut it up, but where you might have a problem is if you start cutting something sideways. Then it's going to come unraveled a little bit easier, but certainly when you just cut it vertically this way, one rib will do it all the way down to the bottom. And we have a cardigan. It is that easy. Think of doing this also with children's clothes, because this is a great way to get another year or so out of something, to open it like this and make it into a jacket. And it's just a really neat little project to do. Well, anyway, you'd put this on, and if it's going to split this much, then half of that, whatever it is what you'd need to add somewhere. Or maybe you don't need to add anything. Maybe it's all right as is, but whatever, splitting, it's going to be the first thing you do. What I decided I was going to do with this then is leave the turtleneck on and just border the whole front, the whole split, with about a 2-inch strip of suede. And before I did that, I put some fusible interfacing on the back side of it, because I did want to beef it up and make it firmer, because that suede can be just a little bit soft at times, and you want it kind of firm if you're going to put buttonholes and buttons on it so that it really holds well. So that was the first thing, to put that on. And I just cut those. Probably in the beginning I cut it longer than the sweater, because as you stitch it on you may need a little bit more. I always want that insurance policy there. I don't want to get way to the bottom and find, oh, if I just had a 1/4 inch more I could make it. As it is, it's too short. So cut it a little bit longer than you need it and cut off what you don't need at the other end. Now, I pretty much know what I'm going to need, because you want to resist the tendency of having this stretch out as you put it on, or it'll dip in the front, and that's not going to be very nice at all. So be sure you do keep it pretty well in line by either maybe fusing it or taping it or doing something to attach it to the sweater, glue stick maybe, whatever it's going to take to do something like that before you stitch, to ensure that it won't stretch really. Okay, then I wanted to decorate it, and I didn't, of course, remember completely what that sweater looked like up in Victoria, and that's all right, because you always want to do your own thing. You don't want to copy something verbatim. You just lift their idea and then go on from there by adding your ideas to it. Well, what I remembered of it is that that suede wasn't cut in just straight strips. It was kind of wavy. Well, something that is just marvelous is all the wavy blades you can get for rotary cutters right now. And one that I'm especially fond of is this one that comes on a little platform. It's all together here, this craft cutter. And it will cut fabric or just about anything else you want to cut. Now, what's fun about this is that it's attached already to a ruler, and it's just here on the edge. You naturally are only going to cut straight lines with it. It doesn't go off in curves. And what I've done here is put a wave blade in it. And with this wave blade, instead of a straight blade, how this works, by the way, is that you just push it, and that blade then goes down, and as you push along, it cuts whatever you have in it. But with this wave blade in it, my first thought was, how do I know that the wave's going to come out just right every time? Well, the obvious way is to practice this on paper and see. Now, here's what I'm talking about. I want, maybe, and maybe not. You are doing this and you do it the way you want. I wanted my wave to go the same way on both sides, whether it was a heavier, a wider piece, or whether it was a narrow piece. And the only way to ensure I could do that was maybe to, first of all, cut a few strips of paper and see exactly how I would do it. And I found that how I could do it is when I put this down, and as I first push, if I would look very closely here, I could see that this bottom curve was in the same place. It was right at the edge of the fabric when I started cutting. And by making it in the same place every time, as I pushed down and started moving it along, it would come out just perfectly in the wave I wanted. So this is what I've done. Let me just cut a little bit to show you what fun this is. Now, not only is this wave blade available, but also at times I put in a pinking blade, and at times there's a straight blade, but all you do is push and then cut, and you've got your nice little wave that pulls off. And I cut this wave so close to the edge that I was really being conservative, that I only have little tips that come out. Let's be a little more generous than that, for goodness sake. Let's bring it back here and cut something a little bit deeper so that we actually have a piece that comes off. But all of these little snips that you take off can be useful for something, so don't throw them away. Put them in your stash and keep them all for some good reason. Well, what I have done is cut a couple of strips a little narrower. These are the size strips that I put here, and there's no sense really when you sew them on in sewing along that edge, and because nothing's going to ravel, for goodness sake. It's suede, so man-made suede, but it's just a matter of stitching right down the center of it, a straight line, and this is very easy to do. Now, this I did not interface. I didn't do anything to it. I didn't fuse it on, because since I'm going to stitch down the center, it kind of flips out a little bit, and that's fine. It looks nice that way. It might complicate the process if you try to fuse it on first. What I also did with this, even though I was cutting it in straight lines, I cut this on the crosswise, because that's where the stretch is in suede, on the crosswise, not on the lengthwise. And if you would put this in curvy lines, then it's nice that it has that stretch so that you could curve it around back and forth easily, because if you cut it on the straight, it won't do this curving. Well, whether it's straight or curved, it doesn't matter. It's going to work well as long as you cut it on the crosswise. And what you also need to decide then, if you're going to cut anything lengthwise, is which direction that nap is going to go, because that certainly makes a difference. After I got these wavy rows on, then I cut out these other shapes. And I found out very quickly it makes a big difference because I put one of them on upside down and it looked like a different color. So let's get back to the wavy blades and see what else you can do with that. Now some of these I cut a little bit wider, not quite this wide, but some of these are wider. And what I have done with all these little holes that are punched in, I did that with a gripper attachment, a snap attachment, and as you first punch a hole in fabric to put a gripper or a snap in, you punch this little hole, and it can be a decorative thing as well as a utilitarian thing. So I've just punched these holes and I haven't done anything with them. However, when I got to the sleeve, I not only punched the holes, and this is a leftover from the sleeve, but you can see that also I wove a little strip of straight suede in there. And that's kind of a pretty addition. And here's how that one went. Let me just get a straight cutter here and get a little bit of cutting going. And I'll just do it on a different color so you can see it more easily. But this is a little, maybe an 1/8 inch, slightly more than an 1/8 of an inch strip. And it's just cut very simply. And these cutting mats come in 3 different sizes, so you can have whatever project you're working on. If it's a small project, you probably do better with a small cutting surface so you can turn it if you want to, or change it in whatever way. If it's going to be used with this big apparatus here that has the blade on attached to the ruler, then I want this big cutting mat so that it's sufficient for the whole length of it. And with this little project, I'm not going to change mats. I'll just do it, of course, on this anyway. But simply cut a little strip there, and this strip, what makes it so easy to weave, you can probably do it easily enough just by bringing it in and out as is. But what makes it easier first is a tapestry needle, which I dearly love and use for so many, many things. Now you saw this last week, I think I showed it as I was showing you one of the many uses for it, or a couple uses, but here's another one. Because that eye is so big in it, it will accommodate a strip of suede. In fact, a much wider strip of suede could go in it. And then it's a lot quicker and easier to just lace this in and out. And once you have it all laced, pull it on through, and it gives another pretty little decorative touch. So here's something else you might want to do to update or to make a new project, whatever it is you're doing, and put whatever colors you like in here. And it's kind of pretty this way. I thought it might also be pretty if you would mix suede and leather together. And then what I have woven in and out of here in more suede is not just that straight little strip. It is using the wave blade again, and it gives a completely different look to it by using that wave blade. If we have time later on, we'll do some more blades because I mentioned some in a former program, but I haven't shown you how they are used yet. And what they are is a lot of different shapes besides just waves and pinking. So we may get back to that later. If not, there are more programs down the line. Now what I did with all these shapes here is take one of those templates that you can get in quilting shops, or maybe you just want to draw some sort of a design. But I use this because this seemed like a really easy way to start. And then when I'm working with suede, I don't want to waste anything at all. I want to make sure that I use every bit of it. And so what I did to condense it is trace it this way. And this is just traced on some paper as I was trying to firm up my ideas to see what would work. And it worked beautifully, so this is how I did it. I didn't want these little in-between places at all. I just wanted these little S curves here and use nothing but those. So what I did first of all is trace this on a piece of fusible web that's covered with paper that you peel off. So on some of this I just traced the actual pieces. So let me get a pen here and show you how easily this traces. And so it does disappear in case I want it to. I'll just do it with an air-soluble marker here, and I'll just do a little bit of it. But this template, of course, is going to have little splits in it, so you just fill that in as you cut, and it doesn't make a bit of difference that those splits are there. But if I trace one of these, and then don't waste all the space in between, but I'll move the next one on up here to a place where it just fits exactly, and when it's right in shape, without wasting anything, there we go, I can just trace a new one as it goes on from here. And then I'll have, you can see they're just nothing wasted, just right next to each other, and you keep on with that as you add the rest of them, as many as you need. And then, so that you make sure that you don't make a mistake and have any of them going the wrong direction, with the nap going the opposite direction, then it's a good idea also to trace all this on one piece, and you can't make a mistake because they will all be fused on the suede at the same time. They'll all be going the same direction. So what I do then is just fuse this on my suede, fuse it on the back of this, and after I have it fused in place, and look carefully to see which is back and which is front, because sometimes it's a little hard to tell. And before you fuse this, hold the suede both ways to decide exactly how it is you want to cut, because it looks different colors. If the nap goes up, it's a darker color. If it goes down, it's a lighter color. So check in advance to see how it's going to look best on this. And then I'm going to fuse it to the back side. After it's fused, I will cut out along those lines, and these are disappearing already with humidity. And so you have to do it quickly or else do it with a more permanent marker. And after I have those all cut out, each one individually, then one at a time I'd peel off the paper backing as I place them in place. And as I did this originally, I actually did, of course, cut them all the same direction, but when my mistake happened is when I was placing them here, and one of them I accidentally turned around, because an S looks the same upside down or right side up, and so I just had one the wrong way, and boy, was there a color change. So you might think about that. After I had that all in place then, and I actually did fuse these because they were bigger shapes and they were curvy, and it's better to fuse those in place so that you can't have anything moving when you do the actual stitching. Now when you do that fusing on this, make sure that you cover it with a press cloth. You don't actually want to put that iron on the suede surface, because of course it's going to mash it down and it's probably going to ruin it, and it's never going to look quite as nice again. So be sure you do use a press cloth over it, and then you can press it without any nasty things happening to it. Well, some other things I'm going to do, because I really love these blades. They really are fun to use. Let me show you how easy it is to change one. And all you need to do is, let's see, which one we'll change to. What I said I had over here is something that it very plainly states on the package that it is for paper only. But you know how sewers are. They like to try things out and see if it's going to work somewhere else, and you never know until you try it. So what am I putting in here? Oh, this looks kind of interesting. It is a tiara. And there's a little name over there in 3 languages, but it's a tiara blade. And so we're going to use that one, and it gives a pretty little peak, and I like the way that one looks. So to change it, it's this simple. You just put this on end, you turn this little orange guard so that it just comes loose. Take the former blade off, and you put the new blade on, and it tells you to have it against the guard there, so don't turn it upside down. Put it on this way, just the way you took it out of the package, and once it's down here in place, you put the little orange guard on again and turn it. And let's see, like this is how I had it as I was first putting it on. And you turn it, and everything is caught, and it's that simple. It really is no problem at all to change that blade. And this one automatically retracts, of course. When you release the pressure, it comes right back, so you can't get cut on it. It's not a dangerous tool at all because it does it automatically, whereas on the handheld ones, every time you use it, it's a good idea to retract it to make sure that you don't accidentally cut something on it that you don't want to. Also, this blade that I just took off, before I start doing any cutting, I would immediately like to put it inside a package, probably its own package instead of this tiara one, but not necessarily. This way I'll remember to put it in here and then put this back in the cutter or whatever. But I'll just snap this closed again, and it'll be held tightly, and so it's safe. It won't be in it won't be in harm's way. Well, this tiara, let's see what happens, because it looks like it might be a pretty thing. So let's cut a little suede with that and see what it looks like. And if I cut this, I'm not going to put it way over at the edge, because then I'll just get the little crumbs on the outside. I want to get a big fat swipe of it, and so I'll put it in far enough that I will get that. Now remember, paper cutting only, and let's see what happens if I try it on a suede. Well, it looks to me like it does quite well. I didn't push quite hard enough in one little spot, but isn't that a pretty little cut that it makes? I'll put it here on white where you can see it better. And isn't that a pretty little scallop thing? So even though they warn you what you need to use it for, it's okay if you veer from that direction and cut it. Now, if I just want a lot of these straight on one side and the tiara cut on the other side, then the next one that I cut here, I would, instead of using that blade that's included on the ruler, instead of using that, I would cut it about the same width, and here I'd use the straight blade to do the job, and just cut another one so I had a twin here, and then I could use the two simultaneously, maybe next to each other this way, or maybe turned around so that the straight edges are together, or however. This turned, and they kind of interplay here in an interesting way too, if you'd like to do that with them. So as many stripes as you want to put on. This is just a fun thing to do. Now, after I had all those decorations on, then I thought, I want to line this jacket because I want to, you know, make it kind of finished, make it a jacket instead of just a sweater. So what I did for a lining, you have two choices here. Before you put all this together, you can just put it down flat and cut out a lining with it, or if you'd rather, you can use a patterner. And just make sure that you set that patterner to the same size as the sweater. Put the sweater on top of it and open this the same way and just use this. One way is going to work as well as the other way, but it's nice to have a lining. What I actually did on mine is cut out a little pattern for it first because I wasn't sure if I wanted to have this lining or not at the time I was putting it together. By the time I put all the embellishments on it, I decided, yes, I definitely do want this to be a jacket with a lining, so that was added later. And by the way, if you put a lining in, you want to include it in that band so that it just holds everything nicely together there. And then, of course, it's very easy to make the buttons and buttonholes. Well, this is such fun to use that blade. You start thinking, okay, what else can I do with it besides just embellish this sweater? Besides doing something like this, how about doing some wave blades also on maybe polar fleece to put on little girls or boys or whoever? How about doing some things like that? Because polar fleece would cut just as well as this suede, in fact more easily, but it wouldn't ravel, so it would be another good thing to cut. Any woven fabric or knit fabric would probably, with usage, fray, and so possibly that would not be to your liking. You might perhaps instead go with something that doesn't fray. Well, here's something also that's really fun because I was having such a good time with that blade. Now when you do something of this sort, and this we're going to use, 2-3 shows down the line, you'll see this again, because it's going to end up a little clutch bag is what it's going to be. But I had such fun cutting these waves that I thought, let's cut a whole bunch of them. And so I took all the scraps that I had in suedes that were in reds and oranges and pinks and that type colors, this color family, and just cut 1 or 2 of every one of those. And they weren't necessarily all the same size. What I wanted this to do is to fan around this way and that to give a little variety. And then after I had a whole lot of these cut, and what that meant, by the way, is that one end of it's going to be narrow and the other end's going to be wide since it is fanning in both directions. And what it also means is that I don't have to be very careful about where the bottom of that wave is when I'm cutting, because I'm only cutting one side of it, and therefore I can just go ahead and cut. What I have done then is put it on some fusible fleece. It's all fused down in place, and what I have, wherever it doesn't quite get down far enough, I have some of this little, I've shown it to you on a former show, it's double-faced tape that Coates puts out. And it fuses on both sides. I'm just peeling off the paper, sticking this down. You can still change your mind and move it if you want to, but once you press this, it's permanent. And so I won't need to do any stitching on that. After I get it all fused, I'm just going to cut around the edge and it's ready to go. Now I have some other pretty things that people have done, and I'd like to show you those on some models. So for one thing, here's the first one, and this is really just something I did several series ago, but you can see it's the same idea in a periwinkle blue, suede and sweater together. Then I have 2 suits here that are just really pretty, and they're by Betty Haskins of Lexington, Virginia. And even though they aren't a combination of sweater and suede, the suede cutting idea is there on both of them. Notice those little scallops, those curly cues that she has cut so beautifully out of some suede, and probably with scissors instead of a rotary cutter, so that you can go around the curves easily. and really a pretty job. The next one that you see there, and this is a sweater yardage that's been knit and made into a sweater. And then I especially want you to look at the collar and cuffs, because maybe you can't see from such a big distance, but they are actually little tiny strips of suede that have been knitted together, and you can feel the difference even though you can't see it. And it's just beautifully put together, the knit out of the little suede strips. Now the last thing, also by June Grieg of St. Louis, this isn't even a sweater, but the suede idea is neat. And you can see that she has suede trim there and suede covering the seams. And notice how the inside and the outside, if the model just flips open that coat a little bit, notice that this coat is actually reversible, and the suede on the other side is a different color. And I'd like to show you then how you can do this if you decide this is a good idea. What I have done with this little sample is simply butt the edges together here and zigzag them in place, and then I'm going to put one color suede on one side and stitch it down. On the other side I'll put a little wider suede of another color and stitch it down, and then you won't be able to see any of that stitching, the fact that the last one you put down is wider than the first one you put down, and it all really works well. How about that for recycling something old that you have at home and making something very new out of it, and just a wonderful idea. Well, that visit in Victoria was really lovely, but we'll move on east while we're in Canada, over to Alberta for Lethbridge leanings. Now, why do I lean toward Lethbridge? Well, everyone there does, because the wind blows all the time. Come join me next time and we'll see what crops up while we're leaning.